Hi, everyone. My name's Dan Hughes. I'm the president of Segmental Systems. I'm a hardscape contractor out of Spokane, Washington, and I am a hardscaper.
What's happening, hardscapers? This is episode 204 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And on today's episode, we have another I Am a Hardscaper interview with Dan Hughes of Segmental Systems. We kind of ditched the usual line of questions for when I do these I Am a Hardscaper interviews, so this is a really interesting one for you to tune into throughout. But before we get into that, we want to thank our sponsors, Cycle CPA. If you need bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for $200 off their services there. And they are at cyclecpa.com, as well as our GPS tracking sponsor, GPS Track It. If you need GPS tracking for your work vehicles equipment, head on over to gpstrackit.com/how-to-hardscape. And we'll talk more about both of those sponsors later in today's episode. But without further ado, let's get into our episode here with Dan Hughes. All right, Dan, let's get started to get to know a little bit more about you yourself, how you got started in the industry, kind of what brought you to starting your own business. Let's start with that beginning context of your beginnings into this industry here.
Okay, so it's kind of an interesting story. My cousins used to come over and at Christmas time, and they'd stay with me when I lived with my parents. I was in high school, and one of my cousins, about 3 years older than me, and he's bragging about how much money he's making in construction. And I'm like, I'm an impressionable high school kid, right? And I'm thinking, oh, how much money is he making? Oh, this is ridiculous, man. I gotta do something like that. So at the time, I was washing dishes at a restaurant for minimum wage, and I was a junior in high school, and I'm like, this sucks. I got to get out of this. And so I just started going down the list. I don't know how to roof. I don't know how to frame. I don't know that much about construction, but, in my previous job, I had done a little bit of repaired some sprinklers and done some lawn mowing and some different stuff like that. I was actually working at a maintenance at a local gun club, shooting range. And so I'm like, okay, I can try landscaping. So I knocked on a couple doors and I had a guy, he's like, when you on spring break? And I said, week after next. He's like, come see me next week. And so boom, I end up landscaping. I worked for him for all week, and then I'm landscaping after school. And to condense this down a little bit, I end up in the landscaping business. And so I'm doing landscape construction, not really any maintenance stuff like that. But and I'm in and out of college for the next, I worked for him for like 9 years, in and out of college. And I got to pay my own way through college. And my goals in life were to be a cop. And, we end up going a different direction, obviously. But so 9 years into this guy's getting a divorce. He's going to lose the business. The handwriting's on the wall. And so I'm like, okay, I got to get out of here. My paychecks are bouncing. It's like, it's time to go. And I ended up try to make a step in my career path. I ended up as a prison guard, step one to try and get into law enforcement. And lo and behold, there's actually a guy that owns Segmental Systems before me. He had done a patio for this landscaper, and the landscaper wasn't paying him. And he knocks on the door, and he's like, Kirk he had a gruff voice. He's an intimidating dude. He's like, hey, you're going to pay me. You owe me money. I'm taking a truck. I'm taking something. And so Kirk walked away with all the snowplow accounts. And I had my own truck, my own plow. So I'm working at the prison. I'm plowing snow for Kirk, the original owner of Segmental Systems. And he says, hey, you want to come to work for me? And we tried it out. And then he said, hey, I want to move to California. You want to buy me out? And so he moved back to California, worked in a block plant down there. And so his business was 6 years old when I bought it in 1998. So all of a sudden, boom, I'm a hardscaper.
Awesome. That's awesome. And let's pick this apart a little bit here, and starting with that end part that you said there, where you purchased Segmental Systems. When you go ahead and purchase it, what were you purchasing? Is it mostly like the assets that were involved in that business, or do you get like a client list from Segmental Systems or a lead list? Like, what goes into actually knowing what you're purchasing and what you wanted to purchase it for?
The purchase price wasn't at the time when I was 28 years old, it was a significant amount of money. I mean, I had to mortgage out what I had equity in my house. Luckily, my in-laws had enough faith in me, so they took out a second mortgage on their house. I sold my dirt bike, and I liquidated everything I could to come up with as much money as I could. And at the time, it was two trucks, Bobcat trailer, Bobcat, an equipment trailer being a tool trailer, and all the hardscaping, not all the hardscaping tools, but a good majority of hardscaping tools. I mean, we had the Sandmax screeder, paver carts, all of the key tools that a guy needed to successfully run a hardscape business. And so I think there was about $84,000 worth of tools and equipment that we could put together. And of course, the bank loans, I think they were loaning 75% of that value, and then everything above and beyond that was blue sky. And so I could get most of that money, and then Kirk ended up carrying the contract, and I made payments to him until we got him paid off. So
Gotcha. So what was it like taking that leap of faith into now becoming a business owner? What was on your mind? What were the thoughts going through, and how did you make it work to get to where you are today here?
Yeah. So, when I got that phone call from Kirk, I was working graveyard shift at the prison. I tell you, if you ever worked in a prison, it's the most miserable place to be. The people that live there are miserable. The people that work there are miserable. I mean, my wife was like, "You are a miserable person." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's like, I got two young kids at home. I got a newborn and a 3-year-old, and I'm just, life is miserable. She's trying to keep the kids quiet so I can sleep during the day, and that's not easy to do with little kids. But I wanted out of there so bad. It was like I needed out of there, and so I get this call at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Kirk calls me up and says, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm sleeping." And he's like, "Call me back when you wake up." So I call him back, and he says, "I want to move to California. You want to buy me out?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really interested." And I didn't know much about business. I mean, I'd learned a little bit working for the landscape company that I was in, not the business end of it, more so as I knew how to do the work, which is entirely different, right? And I think that's why a lot of businesses fail, is how to do the work, but the business end of it takes so much to learn. And so I ended up going to Small Business Administration, and they actually helped me get the loan. And I had to do a whole business plan and research my competition, and there's a lot of hoops that I had to jump through in order for them to see that this is actually going to work. And my wife was like, "I don't know why you're doing this. You're wasting your time, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Well, right now it's my time to waste, so I'm going to do it." And once, all the numbers came back and everything got aligned, and then she was all on board. And so, every once in a while I have to remind her, it's like, "Remember when you told me not to do this?" And we've been pretty successful at it ever since. So.
Nice. So during that time going to that small business association, what were the things that kind of started to click in terms of now becoming a business owner? What are the things that you took away from that you were able to like immediately apply or build upon to build Segmental Systems?
Oh man, I had to learn everything from the ground up. I mean, everything business wise from the ground up, I had to learn. And so it was, I think I was reading a lot of books, and Kirk was a great mentor, because I didn't just buy it cold turkey from him. So as soon as we started the process, I was working nonstop. As soon as I said, "Okay, I'm gonna find this paperwork, I'm gonna get this going," I started going to work for him 2 or 3. I think I was end up working swing shifts. So I go to work for him for like 3 or 4 hours before I go to work at the prison, and just helping to learn stuff along the way. And so I got a lot of he mentored me really good, did a good job. And then once my loan got once my loan was 100% approved, boom, I'm out of that prison. I got out of there. I'm working for him full time for, I think it was about a month. And then we changed owners, and all he did was hand me his cell phone, and my wife started, running all the books. And, Kirk's wife ran the books, so she trained my wife on how to do it. And Kirk gave me all the ins and outs of in the field, showed me how to bid, knowing what your overhead is, how much you need to bid these jobs for. And also we'd look at jobs and he's like, you know what, this job kind of sucks. If we're going to do this job, we're going to charge more. Right. And so that helped having a lot of that insight along the way. So, I mean, it's definitely overwhelming, and it was a gigantic step, but definitely worth it.
Just what you said there resonated with me with the this is a bad job, so we're going to charge more for it, because most people, or at least I had to learn the hard way with that one for sure. So with that being said, moving along with that transition period, what did you learn from Kirk, and starting off in that business? What did you learn that you kind of went a different direction? What were some things that you took from Kirk, but you decided, you know what, I'm going to take the business in this direction, as opposed to following what Kirk was saying in here? Or even expanding upon that, what are some things that you've learned since then that you've kind of built upon and made it your own within Segmental Systems?
I said Kirk had it for 6 years, and his background was in the paver manufacturing business. And so he did it on his own one day, just said, I'm done, and went out and charged, plate compactors, everything on his credit card, and said, all right, I'm a hardscaper. And when that happened, I think Kirk did that in 1992, if I remember right. He was naturally in the area regarded as the guy to go to for pavers. And so I kind of followed right in his footsteps. And even though I took over, a lot of people didn't know. It's just, okay, Kirk's in the sidelines. Kirk's gone. So I really walked into a position where we were always, we have always been regarded as the best in our area when it comes to hardscaping. And Kirk had won a national award for a driveway that he had done, and which really helped push him, put his name on the map. It was on the cover of the magazine that ICPI puts out. It was Interlock Concrete magazine. It was on the cover of that as an award-winning driveway, and that was probably 93 or 94. So he just did that a couple of years in. So
going off of a couple of things that you've mentioned there. So I want to touch on overhead, and I want to touch on awards there. Starting with overhead, you mentioned that right off the bat, Kirk was telling you about overhead and what you need to recoup on projects to get that, which is like a huge step forward in terms of understanding business and being able to price jobs correctly. Have you changed in the way you've priced jobs ever since then, or do you kind of still keep that same sort of overhead recovery system that he taught you, or have you evolved since then? What is the pricing strategy for you?
I mean, over the years, our overhead has gone up and it's gone down. When we started out, we had loans, and as we were growing along the way, we had some equipment loans and we had some truck loans and stuff here and there. But we're at a point right now where we don't have loans on any equipment. We don't borrow money to run the business. Everything we do, we can finance ourselves. So that takes our overhead numbers. Technically, it takes our overhead numbers down a little bit, but we still operate as if we were making payments on all that equipment. So we're basically in the background socking money away for future purchases for equipment, right? Because just because something's paid for now, I mean, it's going to break down. You're going to have to replace it. You want to be planning ahead for all that ahead of time. And so, we constantly look at our overhead, what it is, I don't bid jobs just to recoup this much overhead. My target is more. How much more can I recover? And so we're shooting for higher numbers than what's expected, because you do have the truck that breaks down, or the transmission that goes out, and there's a lot of repairs that you end up with along the way, and the downtime often costs more than the cost of the repair. So having that money set aside is huge for that.
I want to interrupt this episode to talk to you about GPS Track It. When it comes to running a landscaping business, the question isn't what do you do, but what don't you do? If it's not a customer that needs your attention, it's one of your drivers or one of your vehicles. But you already know that GPS Track It exists to help you know more than what you already know, like the most efficient routes to maximize your service potential, like whether or not your vehicles and crews are where they're supposed to be, like how to save unnecessary fuel costs and other costs. And we're going to be covering the benefits of GPS tracking in the future on this podcast. So we're going to continue with the benefits of GPS tracking, but we'll let our fleet advisors give you the full picture. Call 866-693-1291 or go to gpstrackit.com/howtohardscape. Once again, that's 866-693-1291 or go to gpstrackit.com/howtohardscape. Link will be in the show notes. And then getting into awards. So you mentioned Kirk had already gotten that award. And since then, it's judging by your portfolio, you've accumulated more and more awards. You've become more and more involved in the actual industry itself. Sticking with awards right now, how important is it to you, and what do you and Segmental Systems get from seeking out those awards, such as the H&A Installer Award and all these awards? What does that do for you, your business, and the importance of doing that and seeking those out?
That's really it's a great question. So kind of a little bit of I don't want to make this too long or drawn out, but so since I bought Segmental Systems in 1998, right, is when I took it over. And so for years, we plodded along, did our thing, installed, pavers, did everything we could, got educated, did the best job that we could possibly do. And I had seen probably about 2014 or so, I had seen in a magazine the winner of the paver competition at Hardscape North America. And I thought, oh man, that'd be so cool to go there and see how we measure up against other guys. Because, in my area, there isn't, you have no competition, but everybody's your competitor. And what I mean by that is every landscaper is doing pavers, right? But they're doing it out of the back of pickup trucks. They don't have the right compactors. They don't have the right education. They're just, a lot of them aren't even using base. They're screening sand, throwing stuff down. So, real quality hardscape competitors in my area are few and far in between. So in 2016, I get a call from one of the paver reps over in the Seattle area, and he says, "Dan, you want to come over and be a judge for this event that's going on?" And I'm like, yeah, let me, send me over the information and I'll take a look at it. So he sends it over to me, and I was like, sorry, bud. I don't want to judge. I want to compete. And what it was the Pacific Northwest regional qualifier. And it was the paver competition that qualifies you to go to H&A and compete. And so we take a team of guys, we go to Seattle, and we compete there, and we blew everybody away. I mean, I don't want brag or sound arrogant or anything, but honestly, it wasn't even close. So which really that gathered a lot of attention from the the manufacturers that were there and the people that were there, and they're like, okay, wow, this guy, and this team of guys has really got something going on. So the first prize there was we won a trip to go to Louisville, Kentucky, and compete.
Nice.
And so we went to Hardscape North America, and we competed in the paver competition there, and we finished fifth place by 1 point. We finished fifth place. We missed the championship round by 1 point, and it was very kind of discouraging because it's like we had our pad, that we lay out in the preliminary round was perfect, except for one thing. I rotated the herringbone pattern 90 degrees because the way I started it, it was closer to the pallets. And so it made it easier to lay. And I got docked really hard on that because I got docked like 35 points for having my pad rotated the wrong direction, because now all the corners, the pieces that were supposed to be in the corners, everything, it was wrong. But as far as square level, everything, my pad was great. So, you learn. So the top 4 teams is what goes to the championship round. And so again, following year, 2017, we go there back to Seattle, win that competition, punches our ticket to go to nationals. They sent us to the national competition again, 2017, and we finished fifth place again. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Fifth place isn't so bad, but we were so close. Like, we were 2 points from making the championship round again. It's like, oh man, we're so close. And, but so by this time, actually, though, I've been getting some people at ICPI, the judges that were there. There's a lot of people that are starting to get familiar with us. And I was starting to pick up more classes now, teaching, ICPI classes and stuff along the way. And so I was starting to get some good notoriety. So 2018, I get a phone call. Hey, they canceled the competition in Seattle because you're the only one that signed up. So I called my regional sales manager at Bellegarde and said, hey, they canceled the competition. And he says, well, I didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, they just got a phone call that they canceled it. And he's like, well, we're helping sponsor that. I'm like, well, you want to sponsor a team to go to H&A? And he says, let me call my boss. 10 minutes later, he calls me back. He says, how much money you need? We'll send you. And I'm like, yes. And I put together a budget, presented it to him. It was less money than what they were going to spend helping sponsor the Pacific Northwest competition. So they send us to H&A, and that was the first year we won. It was 2018. And so then, along with that comes more notoriety, which is, it's good. I'm starting to, there's more and more people that are starting to take notice of who you are and how good you guys are. And so then prize package there, we come back 2019, back to H&A, and we backed up our win with a second consecutive win.
Nice.
And our pad, we had 120 cuts in our pad in our championship round. And the other 3 pads combined in the championship round, those guys had the total of 40 cuts combined. So we had 3 times more cuts than everybody else combined. And so it was pretty spectacular. And that's when people are like, holy cow, these guys, they can really, really build something. And, it's not all me. And I got a team of good guys that are, and because we work together daily, we can talk about this and really have a good flow of what's happened. So COVID took it away in 2020, 2021, we were back at H&A again. And now I'm all of a sudden, now I'm friends with a lot of people there. You're really starting to increase your networking and whatnot. And so we win it again in 2021. So 3 years in a row. And they're like, okay, Dan, sorry, but you guys are done. And it's like, hey, they're like, you're a judge now. And so 2022, I go back and I'm judging the competition, with, and I'm judging it with legends of the industry. Right. So it's cool to be hanging out with these type of people, people that I've looked up to for years that have, and run successful businesses. And now I'm hanging out with them and having dinner with them and whatnot. So it's been a good journey. It's, is there somebody out there that can do a better job at the competitions? Probably, possibly, I don't know. But the thing is just being there and doing that gained me some real national notoriety. And when I go to H&A again, just to be judged and do different things, you get some accolades that you really, you never thought you would have gotten, 25 years ago when you buy a little hardscape company.
Definitely. That's an incredible story. So would you say like the biggest thing that you yourself or the business got out of it would be that network where you were able to leverage, I guess, the recognition through the competition to create a larger network for yourself within the industry?
It's definitely helped. And I have a lot of people now in my phone. Right. I mean, just yesterday I was talking to, Steve Jones, that was the founder of PaveTech. He has Fortress Edging now. These are, there's people like that are in my contacts now that I can reach out and talk to about questions about different equipment or different things that happen, and as part of that national, recognition, I wasn't just, it was, you're recognized by peers, you're recognized by other legends of the industry, but it really boosted my involvement with ICPI, which isn't ICPI anymore. It's the CMHA, the Concrete Masonry Hardscape Association. And so as people there took note and said, hey, here's another, they've got some big contractors that are involved in I'm always going to call it ICPI because it's been that way for I don't know how many years. Getting CMHA to roll off my tongue isn't going to work, but they've got large contractors involved, and they really wanted some smaller contractors involved. And so I ended up I got asked to help be on a task group to rewrite the concrete paver installer manual, rewrite the test. And so I'm like, okay, so I flew back to their office and I'm sitting in a room with, again, I'm sitting in a room with some pretty legendary people, and I'm helping, to rewrite the book, and, being an instructor for that course, I was very familiar with it. And so as I'm doing stuff like that, more and more stuff comes in. And so all of a sudden now I'm a voting contractor member of ICPI/CMHA, which is now merged with NCMA, right, the National Concrete Masonry Association. Hence, that's why they had to change the name. But and again, so I'm a voting member, so I'm part of that vote as far as how that takes place. And so I ended up on the education committee for ICPI, and so then ended up on the hardscape construction committee. And after being involved in that, I'm the vice chair now of the hardscape construction committee, which then starting next year, I'll be the chair of that committee for 2 years. And then as another committee that they put together it's a certification committee, which is really, really big for, I think, the hardscape industry. And what this certification committee is doing, it's actually led by Gary Stowe of Stowe Contracting out of Monterey, California. Shout out to him for all the work he's doing. But as part of rewriting the courses, they're making the test meet ISO standards, which is the International Organization of Standards, which now makes it a national trade. And so if you can, I don't know that it'll get to the level of a plumbers and electricians type situation, but your certification right now for your certification from ICPI as a certified installer, you're certified by ICPI. What this is going to do is change it to a national certification. And by doing that, that should elevate the whole the whole hardscape industry and actually make it a viable trade, as opposed to, just, hey, let's face it, there's a lot of guys that don't make it through high school or whatever, that are end up in the hardscape industry, right? This is actually a viable, it should make it a viable trade. And so with that, we're reworking. I just got done a couple months ago. We did the segmental retaining wall, the test for that. They're working on one for MSV, manufactured stone veneer, and then they're going to redo the one for the permeable paver. I'm going to work on the permeable paver one as well. So all these trades are going to have some national credibility, which should be huge for the industry.
I love that. And I know that a lot of people have been wanting to see this for some time. And I think it's super important for the industry. On the flip side of things with that, and another part of my brain is like, I've never gone through the ICPI certification. I know a bunch of guys that haven't, and they still do amazing work. And I feel like even though, it's elevated to that trade status, maybe there's guys that will be left out that won't be able to come into it. But and then going back to the other side, I think it's still more important to elevate this industry to that trade status and have that certification and everything. Your thoughts on that, just to pick your brain on that a little bit there?
So, there's all kinds of Facebook groups and stuff out there, right, where you get information, good, bad, and different from people. And a lot of people poo-poo the ICPI certification. Is like, oh, it doesn't do me any good. It doesn't get me any jobs. ICPI never sends me any leads. No, that's not their job. They don't send you the leads. So they provide you with the education to do the job correctly. Now, and this isn't just somebody saying, no, I think this is how we should do it, right? I mean, I think what people in the industry don't understand is all of the whole process is tested, right? And it's constantly being evaluated. I mean, there's pavement engineering labs that are testing different materials, different things. And so it's an engineered science that goes into doing interlocking concrete pavers and permeable pavers correctly. So getting that education, understanding how pavers work and why they work, that will affect how you install pavers in the future. I don't know how many classes I've taught, but I've had guys, well, I already know what I'm doing. I'm just taking the class because I just want the certification. And they're shopping for trucks on their phone and this and that, and they fail the test, right? Because you're not learning what's important, right? Yeah. Picking up a paver and setting a paver in sand is not rocket science, right? But understanding everything that goes into how it has to be done correctly is huge. And so, I mean, I'm a big proponent for education, and take that certificate. If you get that ICPI/NCMA certification, that certification will follow you as to this new ISO standards. It's being grandfathered in. And so everybody should be doing it. I mean, everybody should be taking, at least somebody, on the crew should be certified. So everybody on the crew is, doing things correctly.
Would you say it might be better before it does hit that ISO standard to get the ICPI to be grandfathered in? Do you think it'll be more difficult in the future to become certified?
It will, and it won't. And then so this is the way this will work. Okay. So with the ISO certification, one of the things that's, is to meet ISO requirements, you had to have a task group. A task group of industry experts is what they call it. So, but you have to have the task group of industry experts that, basically puts together a test. The test has to meet certain qualifications as far as there's no true or false questions anymore. All of the wording has to be very close to the same amount. It's all multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. There's no more. You can't have all of the above, A and B only. You have to be able to pick one answer. And so when going through the tests and rewriting all that, we had to meet all those qualifications. So then once the test is redone, the manual is redone. part of ISO standards is you have to be able to challenge the course. So right now, in order to be ICPI certified, you have to take the course to get the certification. Well, you're going to be able to challenge that and say, no, I just want to take the test. And if I get a passing score, I don't have to take the course. Well, great. But having a little bit of insight on what questions are on the test, because I have my fingers in on a lot of them, right? There's a lot of technical information in there, numbers, tolerances. There's a lot of things in there that you aren't going to know from experience, going out laying in the field. You could lay pavers for 20 years, but if you've never actually been formally taught, what you need to know, you may not pass the test just without taking the course. So
definitely. And even though I haven't done the certification, I'm a big proponent of education. I've got all the ICPI handbooks. I've read them all. So it still is something that is super important to not only the industry, but individuals to be able to educate themselves on exactly what you're saying there. One thing that I hear often, I guess, about ICPI is the talk around open graded base, hybrid base, kind of whatever you want to call that 3/4 inch angular crushed base with the 1/4 inch crushed on top. How it's still not quite recognized by ICPI as a base to install. Your thoughts on that, Dan? Do you use open graded base in your business? And what are your thoughts around ICPI? And my assumption is that they're still testing it and they're still wanting to see the that in the future, essentially.
Yeah, and hot topic for me. Hot
That's
topic
why I brought it up. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
So yeah, no. And I will give my opinion on it. And I have an opinion, and I have an opinion based on facts. And I know there's a lot of people doing it, and a lot of people are going to be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, blah blah blah. Well, so prior to COVID hitting, ICPI was actually trying to do some testing. Well, even years before that, probably I'm going to say 8 years ago or so, a mass email went out from ICPI, and they're like, "Hey, we want to look at some of these hybrid open graded base installations where people are using polysand." And nobody said, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, we got a bunch of engineers that want to come tear up your patio and see if what we did is going to work or not." So they didn't, they didn't get any response from that. And so, they gathered some funding, and right now, COVID hit, which put a damper on things for a little bit. But last year, there's ICPI hired a contractor up in the Toronto area. And they went to a paver manufacturing facility, and they did, I believe it's 9 parking stalls, and they did them with open graded base, chips, sand in the joints, and the parking stalls are actually being used for employees. So they're simulating a real world driveway, and so they're not getting use like you would with streets with all the ESA loads and everything that goes into testing, parking lots and streets. This is more kind of replicating a residential driveway. And so they got it installed, and they're literally they're on a 3-month schedule to go back and monitor everything and see how it's going to work. Well, they got it done August of last year, and winter hit in November, so they had very little monitoring before everything froze solid. And so as it thaws out, they're going to be doing more and more testing. Early indications right now are not looking very promising, because you have when you do your open graded bases, you got a 40% air void in there, which is a lot of space for your sand, your joint sand to drop into. And I know I hear guys like, well, yeah, it takes about 20% more, 25% more polysand to do that. No, you got a 40% airspace underneath there. There's a whole lot more. And so, if that polysand doesn't hydrate fully, and to the full depth of the paver, okay, it has the ability to fall down in there, which now is going to reduce your interlock and what you have in there. The other aspect to the open graded base is, water takes the path of least resistance. Okay, so you're basically creating a swimming pool underneath your pavers, and if you have water sitting underneath there constantly, and it may not be up right touching the bottom of your pavers, but a lot of guys are saying, well, we're just going to use the poly sand and then it won't fall through. But your poly sand is going to constantly be hydrated from that water that's underneath, right? And poly sand, it's hard when it dries, but when poly sand gets wet, it softens back up again. So if it softens back up, that's all the more, you can keep losing stuff out of the bottom and middle range of your pavers without even seeing it on the surface. So, I mean, step one is, if you're going to do a permeable system, do a permeable system, right? I mean, don't use poly sand, or you need to get a drain pipe in there to get the water out, so you're not, creating a basically a swimming pool underneath your pavers. And so this is I don't know that this is going to be the future, or if there's some other things that will take place. I mean, one of the things that's been mentioned is, okay, we do open graded base, we put down fabric, we lay the pavers on top of that, and then put poly sand in the joints, blah, blah, blah. And there's been some testing done on that, and they're finding poly sand, if it doesn't, or regular joint sand, if it doesn't stay in a joint, it can actually migrate underneath the pavers. And so there's this isn't just, looking at somebody's backyard. I mean, there's shake tables and this is pavement engineering laboratories that are doing at universities that are doing this type of testing. And so it's not just some guy in his backyard saying, yeah, I think this will work or not. So I'm skeptical of it. I mean, I hope it works out, because it'll be great. I mean, it definitely changes how things are installed. But the flip side of all that is, I got a call, years ago, 2 years ago or so, to be an expert witness on a job site that went incredibly wrong. And, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, man, if somebody has a problem, okay, and a problem that ends up going to court, and if you've done dense graded base C33 concrete sand, a scientific proven way of doing it, you say, hey, yeah, we were doing this right. But to my knowledge, and to the best of anybody that I've been able to talk to at ICPI, which is their engineering staff, there isn't any proven data that you could back up that says, yeah, hey, open graded bases with poly sand is going to work. And that's where you could get into a big problem, in the future. So, I mean, I won't be popular with a lot of people for saying that, but, because a lot of people are going that way, but I have my doubts.
Gotcha. I just want to take a break from today's episode to talk about our sponsor, Cycle CPA. You may have a CRM or project management software in place, but what data are you using to ensure your estimating is accurate? Having a proper accounting setup and accurate bookkeeping done is key to understanding overhead expenses and other costs that must be recouped in your estimates. Cycle CPA is a remote bookkeeping and CFO firm that helps to connect the dots from the financial reports to the hardscape and landscape data needed in order to reach high profits. They provide landscape and hardscape industry benchmarking, job costing financials by service line, advisory meetings, and much more. Cycle CPA's team of accountants are specialized within the hardscape and landscape industry, and you can visit them at cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. And thank you for answering that there. And since we're on the topic fairly quickly, Another type of base, which has become more and more popular, is synthetic base, something like Gator base, Easy base,
Yeah.
things like that. What are your thoughts on this? As well as for the past few years or so, there's Easy Click base, which is rated for driveways as well. Any thoughts on using that? Have you used it yourself, and your own thoughts on this?
Well, I haven't used it. I was going to use it. I was actually going to try. I don't know if I want to use brand names or not, but anyway, I was going to use one of the geofoam bases, right, on a job, and I penciled it out, and it really, when they pencil it out, it's a cost savings, right? You save all this money, and when I penciled it out, I'm like, I'm not really saving anything, and so I just went ahead and because I really it was a backyard with limited access, and I'm like, this might be a good chance to use it, and it didn't quite pencil out enough to where it was worth the I'm going to call it a gamble, right? And so another one of these things is, again, being involved in the construction committee at ICPI, there's access to a lot of different information. And one of the hot topics that we put to bed about at the last meeting was there was one of the geofoam manufacturers wanted to become ICPI approved. They want to be an improved installation method, and we're like, great, we need 10 projects. That's the standard requirement. We need 10 projects so we can go look at and see if they're holding up. And they failed to provide 10 projects. And it was like, okay, well, if you're not going to provide the projects, okay, how about this? Why don't okay, you give me 100 square feet of it, I'll add on to my patio at home, and we'll try it out. And there was 3 or 4 guys in the committee that were willing to do that, and they weren't willing to give up. They weren't willing to give away 400 square feet of their product that could actually have some people in the committee actually sit there and test it. And so it's like, okay, we don't have the job sites to go look at. We're not getting the material. I guess we're just going to put this thing to bed and say, no, we're not going to prove it. So I think it's more of a homeowner application. I know there's some contractors that have done it. I look at it as, you got to go through all the work of, you still have to do some excavating. Then you got to put down sand, scrape the sand all out to lay the geofoam on, and then put your pavers on top. And it's like, I don't see the labor savings in it so much, but there might be a little bit, but is it worth it? I mean, again, I'm looking at, if I can have something that's proven, and something with documentation that backs up that this system works, do I want to go to something different? And if I have a problem, nobody, the only people that win in a lawsuit is the lawyers, right? Even if you win, you still have all this time and money defending yourself just to say, yeah, hey, I won. So it's not worth it to me.
Gotcha. I'll just say I've used synthetic base quite a bit. I do enjoy it. That being said, where I'm at, I'm actually in Toronto. They just Ontario enforced a new rule where it's a little bit more difficult now to get rid of soil. So in those cases where it's going to become in the future more and more difficult to get rid of soil, the less soil we excavate, the easier it is, as well as we're dealing with a lot of tight access. So in our situations, as well as my business model, I definitely see the savings, but it's definitely not for everybody, and it doesn't work in every situation, kind of like what you were saying there as well.
Yeah. Oh, I get rid of dirt. Yeah, I get rid of dirt for free.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, I mean, getting rid of dirt is easy for me.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that's not, and nobody stocks the geofoam around here in my area, because nobody's gone to that yet. I mean, I have a pretty good mixture of soils where I'm at. I can work in pure sand, I can work in clay, I can work in cobble, round rock cobble, riverbed type situation. So depending on what part of town I go in, what direction I go, I can work with all kinds of different soils. So we might find an application for it, we'll see what
Dan,
happens.
thank you so much for answering those questions, though. I do really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And continuing on, I do have one more question about your involvement there, and then we got to kind of blaze through a
Yeah.
bunch of questions really quick here, so I don't take up too
Sure.
much of your time. Your involvement with ICPI and everything that you've got going on with all those committees you're a part of and the education, and not to mention your own business, and not to mention your own family. How do you balance this all?
um, it's tough. I mean, well, my kids, so I mean, my kids are gone. They've moved out of the house. I got one in Seattle, one in San Diego. So, you see them 3, 4, 5 times a year, right? Um, but and my wife's, she's involved in the business. She, takes care of the, payroll and does our books and whatnot. And, she was giving me, I'm not going to lie, she was giving me some flack because there's a lot of, you spend a lot of time, so I got to fly to H&A every year. And then, ICPI has their summer meeting and they have their winter meetings. And so I'm flying to those meetings and participating in that. But, what I remind her is, what? The industry has been really good to us. I mean, we made a very comfortable living essentially since day one. We've done well. You know, we're we're not, looking at, when's the next check coming in. So I look at it as, okay, industry's been good to me. I want to give back to the industry. And, up until, we started, getting some notoriety, from being at H&A and winning, I never really realized, how much I could actually contribute back to the industry. And, there's a lot of people that, it's take, but if you don't know, and you go to the winter meetings or the summer meetings that ICPI has, and there's 34 different committees and meetings that happen, and there's 400 people there, and these are all people, some of them are, a lot of them are contractors. There's reps from, the paver machine manufacturers, reps from, the paver manufacturers, block manufacturers, dyes, chemicals, all these different people that are all involved in the industry. And, that's basically donating their time and their resources to help better the industry. And I don't really think that most of the contractors realize how much goes into making all of this work. And, I don't think they understand where the industry would be without all the efforts that all these people are putting in. I mean, you go to, Mexico or some of these, countries that aren't as developed as the US, and you look at their building standards and how they build things. And, that's where the paver industry could be without, people being involved in ICPI. So.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question about this. What are some assumptions that you had before you started being involved with ICPI and going to H&A and all these things? What are some assumptions that you had, if any, about ICPI that were proven wrong as soon as you kind of start to get more involved with ICPI and starting to get attending these meetings and that, if you had any assumptions beforehand?
I knew that there was, a lot going on behind the scenes, but you really don't know. I mean, and I've been a member of ICPI for years. And it was just up in, the last 4 years or so that I really stepped up and became a voting contractor member. I was just an affiliate member, which, I mean, I'm going to give a plus to, I think, anybody that's involved in the paver industry. If you've ever sold or installed a paver, I think you at least owe ICPI an affiliate member that's $450 a year. I mean, if every contractor contributed that kind of money, what else could they do? How big could they make the industry? But what you really don't see is what happens behind the scenes with all these people doing different things. I mean, they're pushing to get pavers in all the municipal areas, pushing for permeable pavers. They're fighting to get more H-2B workers into the United States, so we have more labor pool. all the testing and materials, and all the stuff that happens. I mean, it's a massive undertaking to build and grow this industry. And, really concrete pavers have only been in the United States since, the mid 1970s. And so building this industry is in its infancy right now compared to other parts of the world. And, it'll build, it's going to grow. And it's kind of exciting to see, where it's gone, the last 25 years that I've been involved in it, and how much farther it'll go before I finally hang up my work gloves.
Dan, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but there are some questions that I always need to get to. So I think we'll skip through a bunch of the pre-discussed questions there. Maybe save those for another time, perhaps.
Sure.
But I guess we'll stick with those few questions that I always ask here. One of them being a horror story that you've had in business. And the reason why I ask this is we have a lot of people starting out in the industry listening, people just getting started or wanting to start their own business. So just to let them know what can happen as a business owner is always a great thing, and maybe help them put things in place that helps them, prevent things from happening. But Dan, do you have a horror story that you'd want to share with us?
We could go for hours on horror stories. Most of my horror stories are, I think, involve just particular customers that I don't see eye to eye with, I guess. And it takes a long time to trust your gut to figure out whether you're a good fit with the customer or not. And I did some, I don't know, I can go on for horror stories forever, but I got had customers that you can't wait to be done with them. I've had customers that never became customers that, are calling me at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, and they want to change this, they want to change that. And we haven't even stepped foot on the job site to start working yet. And, I had a lady that I was losing sleep over. And I just said, you know what? I haven't broke ground on her job. I haven't even have a contract signed with her yet. We're still in the design process. And the only word she knew in English very well was too expensive. She could speak that fluently, but everything else she had a problem with, right? And I was losing sleep, and I was like, you know what, it's got to be done. It's like I cut ties with her. I'm like, you gotta find somebody else, But and there's been a lot of commercial jobs where I've had some. I could give you some horror stories on. My second year in business, I had my supplier, because he wanted to sell this job, really pushed for me to go after this job. And it was a 84,000 square foot paver job, 5 hours from my house. And so that was, and it was a federal prevailing wage job, or Davis-Bacon job. So now the wages are, basically double what my guys were normally making at the time. And so he pushed hard to get me into that, to get me to bid that job. And looking back, I'm like, I really didn't have any business bidding that job. I got the job, and we made money on the job, but not nearly enough to make it worthwhile. But just, I don't know. There's you could have horror stories forever. I'm sorry, but it's like, they could go on for days.
Absolutely. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Final couple questions here. Any people that you want to give a shout out here on the podcast that have helped you along the way? I know you mentioned Kirk there, who helped you at the very beginning. Any other people that you want to give a shout out here that have helped you online, offline, or look to inspiration, anything like that?
Yeah. One of my big ones, I have to say, Andrew Veer. I met him, I don't know, about 10 years ago. He taught my permeable paver class. And so I met him there. And then when he ended up going to work for Technoseal, he came up and we did a dry bond job. And he came up and with a group of other people, and it was kind of the first dry bond job in our area. So he was there, and a lot of positive accolades came from him along the way. And then of course, then I'd see him I'd see him at H&A as a judge and along the way. And now he's, another one of those people that's just in my phone, somebody I can call or text or have a conversation with. I mean, again, Steve Jones from used to have Paytech. He's got Fortress Edging now. Again, another one of those people that, you can call him up. Frank Gandora, Creative Hardscapes out in Colorado. Chuck Taylor, Ryan Taylor from Old Castle Decorative Paving. A lot of these guys, I looked up to them along the way. And now I've kind of gotten to a position where they're not just mentors now. They're becoming my peers, right? And it's a really good feeling to be able to, to be able to have dinner and drinks and rub elbows with these type of individuals. It's humbling and it's very rewarding at the same time.
Absolutely. And it's just to be able to hear your story, Dan, it's been a privilege to be able to talk to you about everything that you've got going on, the things that you're giving back to the industry. I just wanted to say that before we get into our final question here, which is a big one. And that is, what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning?
There's a lot of things that I wish I knew. But I have a saying that I used in a lot of my when I'm teaching, either the ICPI classes, the SRW classes, or whatever. But not every customer is a good customer, and some of your best customers are the ones you let your competitors take. Okay, and by that, it's like, you know what? If you're not a good fit, and they're, let your competitors deal with this pain in the butt individual and move on to something that's going to make you money and help you thrive as an individual, help you thrive as a company. You don't want these customers that are going to drag you down. Let somebody else have those.
Dan, thank you so much for your time today. That's a great way to end it there. I could talk to you for many more hours, but I think this is a good way to stop this first one here, at least. Dan, where can our audience go find you? Where do you want to send them to? Anywhere that you want them to go to find out more about you, what you got going on, or anything else?
So website is segmentalsystems.com. And yes, I know the website needs updated. It's one of those things I'll never get around to doing. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then I do have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, but I am probably the worst guest you'll ever have on your show about updating Facebook and Instagram. So I'm not a social media person that way. And then, I don't know when this is going to air, but, May 5th, I'll be in Billings, Montana with Belgard. And we're actually going to do a hands-on retaining wall and patio build from the ground up, and teach everybody how to install pavers and retaining walls correctly in a 1 day 8-hour event. So
amazing! I'll make sure this airs before May 5th there. And that being said, for our audience listening, we'll send you to Dan's Instagram page and maybe pester him to be more active on Instagram. Get him posted a little bit more there. So that's Segmental Systems on Instagram there, Dan?
I believe it. I think it's at Segmental Systems. Okay. Yeah.
And if not, the link will be in the show notes for our audience listening that you can just click there. Dan, thank you so much for joining me here. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks for having me on. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Once again, thank you to Dan Hughes of Segmental Systems for coming on today's episode for this I Am a Hardscaper interview. And thank you to our sponsors, Cycle CPA. If you need bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA, www.cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for $200 off their services there. And if you need GPS tracking in your business for your work vehicles, equipment, and so on, reach out to GPS Track It at gpstrackit.com/how to hardscape. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.